And I think it's important to talk about work because as we discuss work found throughout the book of Proverbs, we see wisdom. We see a lot of insight that is vital and important for us today. And even if we're retired, we can still teach these insights and teach these things to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, the kids in the church, the young adults in the church. Work is something that's important. I believe that it was Andrew Carnegie who once said, the average person puts only 25% of their energy and ability into his work. The world takes off its hat to those who put more than 50% of their capacity and stands on its head for those few and far between individuals who devote 100% of themselves to their work. And so while that may be written a long time ago, I believe if you really look, it is kind of true, because we see a lot of people who really don't put forth a lot of effort in their work, who really don't put forth a lot of effort in the jobs that they have, and they just kind of maybe do, if they do, enough to get by. Some people, that seems to be the norm of what they practice. And so while this still may be true, as Christians, what are we to understand about work? What are the expectations that God has for us when we talk about work? And what are we supposed to strive to have it when it comes to a work attitude, if you will? Scripture addresses many of these things, and we're specifically going to look in camp in the book of Proverbs for this information tonight. And so while Scripture has this all throughout the Bible, Proverbs is where we want to look, since we're going through the book of Proverbs for this first half quarter. So concerning work and the workplace, if you look on your sheet, we're now at point number 1. Proverbs teaches first and foremost that we are created to work. We have been created to work. All the way back to in the book of Genesis, we see that man was created and man was given a task, and that was to work, and that was to provide for the things of God. We see Adam being told to name the animals. So he does work from day one. And it's not just Adam, we're going to talk about this later, but even Eve was created to work. We are created to have that purpose of work. Proverbs talks about this all throughout the book, but one of the ones I want to talk about as far as Scripture goes is Proverbs chapter 6, starting in verse 6, going through verse 11. Here it says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food for harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man." And so here we see the writer of Proverbs talking about that we are created to work. We are not created to just lay around and do absolutely nothing, but to be busy working. Now, work doesn't mean you have to go to an actual work site. We can work in many different ways. We can contribute to society and others in many different ways. But Proverbs says that we are called to work. And we're going to unpack some of these statements as we go. In our culture of extremes, where the norm is either overwork or underwork, because that generally seems to be the norm these days, is we're either overworking or we're underworking. How do we as Christians, this is the participatory part, how do we as Christians find the right balance? What are ways we can find the right balance between overwork and underwork? And if you have your notes, you have all the questions we're talking about, so you can go ahead and prepare answers for those. How do we find the balance? I'll give you one while you think. Maybe we don't say yes to everything. We learn how to say no sometimes. Some of us maybe need to learn how to say yes sometimes. How else can we navigate this?
We're supposed to do everything we do as if we're doing it for the Lord. So we need to put our 100% in because we don't want to shortchange him. He didn't shortchange us at the cross.
Okay, so doing everything for the Lord, put our 100% in. And so as we do that, and Robert, you may have had the answer to this, sorry, but I'm going to throw this out to everyone. As we do that, what we're talking about and what we really want to be careful about is how do we do that without overdoing it too when it comes to working? Because this, for example, gets abused sometimes where people think they have to, every time the boss asks for something, they have to say yes and neglect their family. But on the other side, you have some people who they say, no, I have to be with my family. They never say yes to anything. Robert, what were you going to say, brother?
I was going to say you have to set priorities.
Priorities. I think priorities are key. And that's the basis for a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. Priorities. And along with priorities are boundaries, right? Having those boundaries, just when you say yes and when you say no. Having those priorities. Once you can say, okay, God is my priority. Now, is working 70 to 80 hours when I've got a family and young children, is that putting God as a priority, or is that putting something else as a priority, right? God doesn't want us to kill ourselves. He invented the Sabbath for us, Scripture says, right? In other words, the day of rest that they had in the Old Testament. So we too need to participate in having rest. But we have some people in this world who all they want to do is rest, right? And so there's a balance that we have to strike, and prioritizing our activities helps us strike that balance, realizing who it is we serve and asking what it is that he finds to be important. That helps us, as Ricky said, prioritize balance as well. What other thoughts? I gave you guys 2 weeks away with no questions, so you guys ought to be raring to go. Come on. Okay, well, if you download the sheet, you've got the very next question we're about to ask. So go ahead and start preparing your multitude of answers. But the first point concerning work is that Proverbs teaches us that we are created to work. And we talked about Adam and Eve and how both of them were created to work. Everyone in Scripture had a job to do, whether that job was a normal job or whether that job was an ordained by God job. Jesus Christ had a job, didn't he? He learned carpentry, it's believed. Paul, the apostle, had a job beyond just going church to church, didn't he? It says he was a tent maker. And so he held a job as well, because we were created to work and to not just provide for families, but to contribute to society. The second thing that Proverbs teaches us is not only are we created to work, we're called to have a good work ethic. There's a difference in working and having a good work ethic, isn't there? What does it mean to have a good work ethic? What does this mean?
One thing, the boss doesn't have to be there.
Okay, so if I understand you right, Ricky, you're saying that a good work ethic means that when we're working hard, we do that whether or not the boss is there. Is that right?
Correct. You know your job description and you do it well.
You know it and you do it well. I like that. What else would you say characterizes a good work ethic?
My parents always said that you should treat a job as if you're the owner. Do the work in a quality way, and whatever way you're representing the owner as if you were the owner, because then you're giving it the best you have.
I like that. Treat it as if you were the owner, because then you would treat it the best you could. And I'm going to just kind of put this plug in there. And I realize the church is us. It's not a building, but that works wonders when you think of the church building as your very own as well, right? We don't have all that trash that builds up in a church because we pick it up because it's our own, right? When things start to fall apart, we don't just say somebody else needs to do this. We take initiative to try to help if we can get it done. And so, but I like that. When you go to the job, especially secular jobs, we're representing Christ out there. If we're slacking off and not paying attention and doing our job, we're representing Christ, and it's going to give the wrong impression of Christ. What else would you maybe add to a good work ethic?
Josh, having the mindset that no job is below you.
Oh, I couldn't tell who was talking. That was Cody. Okay, what did you say, Cody?
Having the mindset that no job is below you.
Oh man, yes, no job is below you. That is a great mindset. I Daryl Newton and I used to talk quite a bit about one of the neat things about Buc-ee's is Buc-ee's has really good pay. But if you're going to work at Buc-ee's, you're going to have that mindset that Cody just said. And that is, if your job is scrubbing toilets, you're going to make them spick and span because it's not beneath you, right? And that creates a great work environment. But yeah, no job is beneath us. Now, that doesn't mean we do anything and everything, right? Because we want to zero in our skill sets, which we'll get to. But it means that we help out and that we throw in our help whenever it's needed. A couple of things that when you go through Proverbs that it talks about concerning a work ethic, we're called to have a good work ethic. A good work ethic means working hard and not being lazy. And so that's your sub point underneath calling to have a good work ethic. It means working hard and not being lazy. And this is important because we've already talked about, we want to be like the ant who works, who prepares, who plans. We don't want to be like the sluggard who just kind of waits around, because it talks about a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands for rest, poverty will come upon you in Proverbs 6. That doesn't mean we can't rest. It doesn't mean we can't vacation. It doesn't mean we can't do any of that. It just means that's not all we do, right? We need to work. It means that we work hard. We're not lazy. Proverbs 14 verse 23 says, "In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty." You ever met someone who talks a big game and never follows through with anything? We are called to work hard, not be lazy, not just give lip service, but actually follow through with what we've said we would do and what our job is. A poor work ethic and laziness leads to poverty, while hard work leads to profit, Scripture says over and over and over again. Doesn't mean you'll be rich. Of course, then you got to define rich, right? I used to go to Honduras. I mean, we're all rich compared to some of the stuff we saw in Honduras. We're rich compared to several people in the United States. But a good work ethic means working hard, not being lazy. In the 1700s, you guys may have heard of the name John Wesley. He was the founder of Methodism. And so in the 1700s, when he was alive, he once said, "Though I am always in haste, I am never in a hurry, because I never undertake any more work than I can go through with perfect calmness of spirit." And so while he's talking about this in preaching and using this illustration in his writing, what he's getting at is that while you're always in haste, if you get in a hurry and if you don't think through stuff, if you're not methodical about what you're doing and so forth, you're not going to be doing a good job. You're going to become lazy and lackadaisical and cut corners and so forth, right? And he talks about, I'm not in a hurry, and he's never in a hurry, and he's able to do a good job within the context of which this quote is found. He says he doesn't take on more work than he can go through with perfect calmness. In other words, we tend to be able to do good and have a good work ethic and to work hard when we have chosen to prioritize those things that we ought to be doing, right? I said earlier, you can't say no to everything, but you can't say yes to everything either. I have a good friend from college that one of the biggest struggles he had is anyone asked him anything, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. And at the end of the day, none of it ever got done. Why? Because he didn't practice this discipline that Wesley talked about. And because he didn't practice that, he worked hard, but it wasn't working hard in the right direction, so it didn't lead to that good work ethic. Another characteristic of a good work ethic is showing up on time. Now, not everyone is probably as irritated by this as I am, but showing up on time is important, because when you take a job, if it has a start time, you have agreed to show up on that start time in a job. I grew up, and my mentality, and I'm sure it drives my family crazy, my mentality is, if you are on time, you are late. And I like to get places early. And I'm sure it's not fun for my family. I like to get places 30 to 20 minutes early, because then I don't feel rushed. And if something happens, I'm not sitting there thinking, oh no, I'm going to walk in right as the clock strikes whatever time it is. And now you can take that to an extreme as well, right? Now I get there that early because for church, for example, I get there that early because I'm preaching and I want to have a calm spirit, as Wesley talked about, while I'm preaching. And I found if I come in less than 15 minutes before, I have a panicked feeling inside of me. So I go early. I go into the office super early most of the time. And again, it's not because everybody needs to go to the office an hour and a half early. It's because it's a time to get things done before the phone starts ringing and text messages start coming in and stuff like that. It's a time to kind of start my day and have a calm process. And so again, showing up on time doesn't mean you have to be the extreme on time. It just means that whenever you have contracted to be somewhere on time, especially to a job, since this is what we're talking about, you do that. You represent Christ. Now, culturally speaking, this is different in other cultures. Right? I understand that. Not every culture is as tied to the clock as we are. And I'm not just talking about Latin America. You go over to Greece and everything shuts down in the middle of the day in Greece. It's really annoying when you come from over here where everything's open all the time. And they'll go and they'll eat lunch and they'll take a nap and eventually they'll start opening up again. Eventually is the key word, because you kind of don't ever know when, because they don't post, we'll be back at 1. It's we might or might not be back. Just come back when the doors are open, basically, in Greece. And so culturally, it can be different. But in the United States, when we contract to show up on time, that's the time we've contracted to show up. And as Christians, we need to do that. Now, you go, church, for example, I mentioned Honduras. You go down to Honduras, and church starts, let's say, at 9 a.m. People are going to be streaming in long after that, but it's a cultural difference that they have. Their on time is different from our on time. It's not as military-like. Now, some of that has to do also with, by the way, that a lot of them in the villages are walking miles and miles and miles to get to church. But that's another story. Proverbs 10, verse 5 says, "He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame." So it's not even just showing up on time, it's timeliness of when you do things as well. We have to be timely in the way we execute and do things. And so finally, and this is the last one, I believe, under your good work ethic. So good work ethic means working hard and not being lazy. It means showing up on time. It means doing it right the first time. Doing it right the first time. Proverbs 22, verse 29 says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." One who is able to consistently perform the job with skill is one who is honored, isn't it? If we are consistent, if we do it right the first time each time, then we tend to be the go-to person for others, because they know we're not going to just do it very quickly and just get it over with. They know we're going to try to do it right and do it right the first time, because there's a lot of things that you and I do in our jobs that it needs it to be right the very first time you do it, right? I know in the chemical plants, depending on what you do in the chemical plants, I don't know much about the board, I think is what it's called, where you're controlling all the stuff, but I do know enough to know if you control it and if you open one valve when it's not supposed to be open, you can lose the company apparently millions of dollars in just moments, right? Now, granted, we all have mistakes, but that's really a job where you want to get it right the first time, isn't it? If you work for the police department and you're on the bomb squad, you probably want to get it right the first time, don't you? But what about the rest of us? we still want to strive to get it right the first time, to get it right in a way in which it presents skill in how we do it. Proverbs 18 verse 9, whoever is slack in his work, in other words, someone who just kind of puts it off and just kind of goes about it willy-nilly, not really caring, it is a brother to the one who destroys. Well, why? Because if you don't really care about your work and take the care you have to do your work, it ends up destroying things, doesn't it? You have to redo it over and over again. Don't goof off. Don't put minimal effort into your work. Work hard. Do it right the first time. Have a good, strong work ethic. We've probably all heard the saying, measure twice, cut once, so that you don't measure once and cut twice, right? Measure twice and cut once. You do it right the first time, and you ensure that you do it right the first time, because that demonstrates a good work ethic to an employer. And why is a good work ethic important? It's important because, once again, we represent Christ and the Christian attitude to other people. And if we're seen as being lazy, if we're seen as people who don't work, that puts a bad reflection on God and his glory. And this can be, all of what we're talking about can be spread out beyond just our secular jobs. It can be addressed with family life, right? It can be addressed, and it can be relevant to evangelism. I mean, we're all called to the work of evangelism, not just me. And so we need to have a good work ethic in that. We need to realize we've been created to work in that. The third major point, we are rewarded for our work, Proverbs teaches us. Evangelism, we're rewarded for our work in evangelism. It's not about how many people you bring to Christ. God's not up there putting tick marks up there. What it is, though, is, are you trying? Are you working at it? And we're rewarded for that. Scripture says if you'll go out and do the work, you'll reap a harvest. The harvest is plentiful, it says, but the laborers are few. In other words, the people willing to do it are few. Proverbs 12, verse 14, going back to the actual secular jobs, in verse 14 of chapter 12, Proverbs says, from the fruit of his mouth, a man is satisfied with good, and the work of a man's hand comes back to him. Good work produces blessings and rewards. What are some of the rewards we receive for good work? And I'm going to take away the reward in heaven, because that's the gimme, right? What are rewards we receive for doing a good job? And they can be spiritual, or they can be worldly, when we do a good job for our employers.
Joy, like the gift of joy.
Bam. I like that.
Yes, you get, you not only give joy, but you receive it back, because, it feels good when you do a good job, and it makes other people feel good.
So joy, I like that. We give joy, so people receive joy when do a good job, but we receive it. It feels good. I like that a lot. So joy, what are other rewards? I'm trying to help you, Jonathan. Did that work?
We're told to do our best.
Okay. Told to do our best. Jonathan, you're unmuted now. We finally got it.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, teamwork makes the dream work, brother.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, joy is for a lot of people right now is the worldly. You get raises, you get promotions, you get people look to you to do projects in my field, and lead projects. So that's kind of what the world's joy is. But my joy, and I go back to Genesis with a lot of the guys I work with. God told Adam, you're gonna toil in the field, so we're gonna do that, and we're gonna do it with a smile. And I think it's more leading with example. So as you do it, they'll do it too. And I go to Nehemiah for that, because he gathered the 12 tribes together, people from all tribes, and they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, So if he could do that back then, what we can do now without socialism as we're kids and coming up, we can move the world if we just believe in what the man said.
Yeah. You hit on something about rewards when you said if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And I forgot the exact phrasing, but you're going to enjoy doing it. Whenever my sister and my brother and I, when we got put to work on the ranch, we didn't have the option of complaining and mumbling and kind of sulking around, because that led to even worse consequences. We were told, you're going to do this and you're going to be happy about doing it. And I think that helps instill a great work ethic in us, because we found joy in doing that over time. But you're right. I think I saw someone else light up trying to talk.
Yeah, on the corner. Yeah, that was basically all I had to say. Is I know that also with Christ with the disciples and sent them out 2 by 2, that's working together. And as long as you can have somebody that you're going to work with and you can communicate good with and have a good relationship with, you're going to have joy during the day. You're going to go to lunch together. You're going to go to each other's houses for dinner and stuff, and you still have time to fellowship with them away from work about other stuff, my beliefs, their beliefs, and so forth. So I kind of, when I work with guys, that's kind of where I'm at with them. We go fishing and stuff together, have barbecues together and stuff, just so that they know who I am at work is who I am in my life.
Absolutely. And, that's a big key. I mean, even in the church room, one thing I enjoyed about Charlie is I got to interact with him over lunch and so forth. Whenever I was a youth minister, my preacher took me out and we would go eat lunch together. And even whenever I worked secularly, I mean, I had some people that we would go and hang out and go hike with and stuff. And you build those bonds, you build that camaraderie, and that brings, we keep going back to Brittany's word, that brings joy to all of us, and it brings joy to them, but it opens up channels of communication where you can talk, as you said, about beliefs and about God, and kind of ease into those conversations. So it kind of relates to our spiritual work that we're asked to do as well. Anyone else? Okay, so third, we are rewarded for our work, Scripture teaches. And then the next one is, your next blank, if you will, is that, well, let me go back for a moment. So we are created to work. And we talked about it in the garden, we're created to work. Proverbs talks about we've been created to work. We are called, as we work, to have a good work ethic. And Scripture talks about all throughout Scripture, but specifically we're talking about Proverbs here. And then we said that good work ethic includes things such as working hard and not being lazy, showing up on time, doing it right the first time. Those are just a few of the many things it includes. And then we talked about being rewarded for work. And by the way, the one that we didn't mention is we're also rewarded for work by something called money too, right? And so that's where Scripture talks about those who work, those who are lazy find poverty, basically, versus those who work, as long as they are smart with what they do concerning the harvest they receive from that, they tend to be okay. And it's not because they're amazing, it's because God has provided for them, because they've done what they've contracted to do, if you will. So the last thing I want to spend a little bit of time on is something that I think is important for us. And that is, whenever we're considering work, a lot of times we think of the guys and the work the guys do. But Scripture says, and Proverbs 31 is we're going to camp out for the remainder of the class, but Scripture says that it's not just men, but we're to honor women who work, even those who work outside of the house. There was a time in which if you were a woman and worked outside of the house, you were almost shamed for it. And the husband was shamed for it, because obviously the thought was, well, he can't take care of his household. But the truth is, Scripture doesn't shame women who work outside the house. In fact, it encourages those who have jobs. Now, outside of the house, obviously, with today's technology and stuff, you may have home businesses and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about those women who actually bring in an income. Proverbs 31 is one of the most famous, but it's not the only set of scriptures that talks about this. Remember Lydia? There's several people in Scripture that had skills that worked. So we're to honor working women, not just men. Proverbs 31 honors the working woman, and it honors specific things about her. And we're only going to do a few of these, not all of them. The first thing Proverbs 31 teaches that we ought to honor about the working woman is their skill and their ability that they have. Their skill and their ability that they have. Verses 11 through 14 of Proverbs 31 says, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm. In other words, it's good that she's working. It's not hurting him. All the days of her life, she seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. Now, before we write this off as, well, all she does is sew, if you actually read the whole chapter, she does much more than sew. She holds many different skill sets and jobs. But really, in Proverbs 31, we're encouraged to honor working women and the skill set and the abilities that they bring. They bring a lot to the table. Do you guys remember that commercial of anything? I think it was a song, but it was turned into a commercial. Anything you can do, I can do better, right? I'll be honest, I found that true for most of the time when it comes to a guy versus a woman. Generally speaking, my wife can outperform me in everything. That's why, got to make sure her thing cut off. I'm just joking, Katie. That's why whenever you're teaching your wife something, you withhold one little key piece of information. No, I'm joking. I don't really do that. But the truth is, how many times, guys, how many times have we done something only to be shown up by our spouse or be shown up by a woman? I mean, some of the pilots that I know that are better at the little Cessna 172s are the females, because the guys want to showboat and do all this other stuff in it. There's a lot of skill sets and abilities that women have. And so when they go and work, they bring they contribute something. This idea of women shouldn't work is a real new idea and compared to the rest of history. The idea that women should stay home, and I know it's not that much anymore, but back in the day, my understanding is from my grandpa and stuff, what he talked about, that was kind of no, women don't need to work. They need to be in the home. And by the way, women who are in the home, that's a very important job too, because to be fair, you do work in the home. But there's nothing wrong with going out and earning money either, because throughout history, that was a huge job that women would do, not just stay home and keep the house. There's nothing wrong with that, but we don't need to shame women who do go work. I know with Katie and I, a long time ago, we were at a church and somebody used to get on to her. Now I don't know if it's getting on to her, but they would kind of make little snide remarks about her working, which, to be honest, what I wanted to say was, well, if you would pay us better, she wouldn't have to work. But their point wasn't pay. Their point was, because that person's wife didn't work, they felt Katie shouldn't work. But they were neglecting a huge part of Scripture, because there's so many scriptures that talk about what women can contribute. Another thing that it honors with working women is their dedication and the provision that they bring in, how they help with the support of the household. Proverbs 31, verse 15, she rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. Now, I don't know about you. I don't really have maidens in my household, but that might be nice. But she provides. She brings in provision. She shares the workload with the husband. And again, everything I'm saying, I'm not saying women have to work, but I am saying women can work, because Scripture allows both. Proverbs 31, verse 31 says, give her the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. So we also honor the fruit of their works. We tell them how impressed we are with what they've done. We encourage them, not falsely, but because they deserve it. They've earned it. Now, while we talk about this, anything you can do, I can do better is great in theory. We know it's not true, right? There are just some physical things that I can do that my wife cannot do. There's some things she can do I cannot do. I cannot do the splits. I'll be honest. Just putting that out there. I cannot do the splits. Nor do I ever want to willingly do it. But when it comes down to it, we all have different roles, but we all can work with regards to those abilities and those skills and so forth. And we don't make either the male or the female feel shameful for work. We're all called to work. And so Scripture teaches us 4 different things. We're running low on time here. Scripture teaches us that Christians are created to work. We are created to have a purpose. Work is a fulfillment of a purpose. And again, you can be retired and still work. What you don't want to do is retire and just sit there like a bump on a log and do nothing, right? Be about the work of the Lord in one way or another. So we're created to work. We're called to have a good work ethic in the work that we do. We are rewarded for our work, and we honor everyone who works, not just men, but women also. And so we do these things not because it's easy, not because it's always fun, but we do these things because we as Christians represent Christ to the world. We're ambassadors, Scripture says. We work hard. We have a good work ethic. We understand that we are created to work, and we go about that work because we represent God. And God works. God works all the time. God is always working. Christ worked from the moment he started his ministry to the moment he died. He was at work. We are created to work. And in our work, in our interactions with those in our workplace, we represent Christ. So when you're working, whether you're the boss or whether you're the employee, or whether you're maybe not employed and you're working from home as a retiree or something along those lines, whatever you're doing, do it so that it glorifies God ultimately. And these are 4 of many ways, of many things that we are taught when it comes to working. So there's the lesson. Do with it what you will, but I do want to say a prayer, and then if you guys want to chat, we can chat, and we will end our class this evening.